This is Alex from the Love Light Movement, and today I guess I just wanted to make a video sort of talking about what the so I talk a lot about on the website the collection of cooperative adaptations and the collection of competitive adaptations. And I want to talk about these two collections of adaptations today, how they came to be in humans, and how the interaction of these adaptations influences everyday human behavior, both in groups and in everyday scenarios. So, first of all, to get a good understanding of sort of what I'm talking about, I think it's important to view. So, I'm working up to human evolution, and I think it's important to understand that how humans interact with other humans in today's environment is a result of our evolution over a vast time scale. And evolutionary adaptations which exist today and influence human behavior, some of these adaptations formed millions of years ago in other organisms that are related to humans on the evolutionary chain and were passed down. So it's important to think of the things that I'm saying on a timeline. But once these adaptations develop, it takes a very long time for them to sort of select themselves out of our being. And so many of these adaptations that developed a long time ago are still present within humans, even if right now they're maladaptive. So I'll start by talking about the collection of competitive adaptations, because this collection of adaptations is the much older of the two adaptations. It really is thought to have begun to exist at the same time that organisms themselves began to exist. It is thought to always have existed since there were less resources than there were organisms, or there was a limitation on resources. And whenever there's a limitation on resources, or there's less resources than there are organisms who need those resources, then the competitive collection of adaptations becomes beneficial. So when looking at both of these collections of adaptations, they both develop in a similar way. So, like I said, the collection of competitive adaptations is the much older of the two. And how it starts is like this. Imagine there's a bunch of snakes, and all of these snakes are competing for the same resources, but there's not enough resources to sustain all the snakes. And at first, the snakes are indifferent to each other. They see each other, but they don't care. It's just another snake, and they're just going to get their resources. But there's not enough resources for all the snakes. So whichever snake gets to the resources last dies. And so it becomes beneficial for one snake to have traits such as aggression and fear towards the other snakes. It becomes beneficial for this one snake to view the other snakes as enemies, or to view them as hostile, thus creating a sense of cooperation. This is the foundational motivation at the bottom of the collection of competitive adaptations. It's this aggression and this fear. And so now imagine this snake, and this snake views the other snakes as hostile. And every time it sees them, it gets angry and it acts violently towards these other snakes. Well, this might scare off the other snakes. This might allow this snake to have a higher advantage of getting to the resources. And so it increases this snake's survival. And so this is the foundational motivation. Now, upon this foundational motivation, there can be many more competitive adaptations that are built. So once the snake views the other snakes as competitors or hostile, then it becomes beneficial for that snake to, say, have a louder hiss. And this louder hiss scares off the other snakes more. It becomes beneficial for the snake to, say, it has a red stripe down its head, and that red stripe is scary to the other snakes. And so, again, think of it like a bundle. Atop this base motivation develops all these other adaptations until you have a bundle of competitive adaptations which all serve to do the same thing: foster competition. In order to make you more likely to acquire the resources you need by outcompeting other organisms that want the same resources. Now, on the other hand, we have the collection of cooperative adaptations. So how did this form? Well, this collection of adaptations developed farther down the evolutionary timeline. We do see examples of cooperation and these adaptations developing among other species besides humans, but we see this collection of traits sort of take off in humans. And so I'm just going to talk about that. And so basically, our early hominin ancestors, I don't know exactly what year. I know it was basically right before humans progressed to behavioral modernity, which is just the way we are now. So it was before that, and these early hominin ancestors, they lived among small groups of humans, and these small groups were sort of somewhat spread out, and these same small groups were competing for the same resources in it was a hunter gatherer type setting. And so it became really beneficial for the small groups of humans to cooperate together, and so that they could work together to outcompete the other small groups of humans. So you can see the cooperative collection is still there because the small groups are competing. But this new thing is going on where it's important for the members of the small group to cooperate together. And so you have these, again, the foundational motivations at the bottom of the collection of cooperative adaptations. And so, kind of at the core of the collection of cooperative adaptations is a phenomenon known as social buffering. And so, what this means is when an organism is closer to maybe a small group, maybe let's say its family members, it feels safer. And this phenomenon evolved within organisms because of safety in numbers. So if an organism is competing with a lot of other organisms for the same resources, and that organism has maybe a few family members, then of course it's less likely for that organism to be attacked by its competitors when the family members are there. And so it becomes beneficial for this organism to stay close to these family members. So this adaptation is sort of a built-in way to make sure that organism stays close to its family members. This creates this internal sense of safety when around members of a small group. And once this started to evolve within organisms, it sort of draws these small groups together because each organism in that small group feels safer when it's around the small group. And this is sort of the initial motivation that began to foster cooperation. It's at the bottom of the collection of cooperative adaptations. And then upon this initial motivation, many other adaptations for cooperation began to evolve. And these other adaptations for cooperation were things like empathy, the altruistic reward system, the ability to take in culture, cultural acquisition, the ability to teach culture. All of these adaptations now become very beneficial because if an organism has this adaptation that allows them to better cooperate, that organism is then more likely to survive because now that organism is living in a cooperative environment, and the better they can cooperate, the higher their chances are of surviving. Individuals who are better at learning will have a higher chance of survival in that group. Individuals who are better at communicating with the others they're cooperating with are going to have a higher chance of survival in that group. And so these new adaptations are forming, which are fostering communication, they're fostering learning, they're fostering teaching. And so this began to happen in humans because of these small groups. And then where it is believed, or what is believed to really have progressed humans to behavioral modernity, or the way we are now, is something that is called the ratcheting effect. And so once humans, they have this foundational motivational system, they're cooperating, then we see culture starts to happen, and things are done in certain ways, and it becomes very important for other members of the group to be able to take in culture and take in the way things are done in that group and learn. And those humans who are better cultural learners have a higher chance of survival. And so this selects for better cultural learners. Okay, so now you have a group of this group is now progressively becoming better at cultural learning. Okay, well, what happens when the group is better at cultural learning? Well, the culture that the group is putting out becomes more and more because they're better at learning, and so also their output is higher. And what happens when there's more culture? Well, this causes for an even higher selection. It needs better cultural learners. So it goes back and forth. It's a ratcheting effect. And as you keep on selecting for better cultural learners, the output of culture keeps becoming higher, and both of them keep becoming higher, and this results in an increase in what we refer to as intelligence. And so this ratcheting effect happened in the human species, and it is thought to have or be one of the leading factors that led us to have a higher intelligence than a lot of other species, is because of these original small groups and the development of the collection of cooperative adaptations. Um, because in many other species, there's less emphasis on this collection of cooperative adaptations, and therefore we don't see the ratcheting effect occurring. Now, the ratcheting effect definitely is occurring and has been occurring in some other species. It just hasn't occurred yet to the extent which it did in humans. And so today, now, you have both of these collections of adaptations, the collection of competitive adaptations and the collection of cooperative adaptations existing simultaneously in humans. Because, like I said, in the original setting in which the collection of cooperative adaptations formed, the collection of competitive adaptations was already in full swing. Because remember, these small groups of humans, the humans are already competing for the same resources, but it then became beneficial for them to compete in small groups, to cooperate with the small groups while competing against other small groups. And then we progress into modern day humans, and we still take on a lot, like all of these characteristics. These both of these collections of adaptations interact in ways which influence how we interact with other humans. And we see it, I mean, all the time in things like in-group out-group dynamics, racism, oppression. All of this stuff is a result of the interaction between these two collections of adaptations which have formed over time. And I'm going to make another video. I'm going to make two videos after this. One is going to be about how these two groups of adaptations influence group behavior, and how the in-group, out-group dynamic, and how this dynamic is detrimental to modern-day society and how it's become maladaptive. And then the other video is going to be about these two collections of adaptations and how they interact and are enacted, or how each of these adaptations are triggered as we go through daily life, and how sort of two pathways form, and how we can emphasize either the competitive pathway or the cooperative pathway, and why it's beneficial to emphasize the cooperative pathway. So I'll make these two videos and I'll post them after this video. But I think that's all I have for this one. And I hope everyone watching this has a fantastic day. May the love flow freely among us all.